And we're live. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out today for a very special interview with author Kel Coleman. It's always like mirrored on my screen, so I don't know where I'm pointing. But yes, getting back into the author interviews after Black Ethithon, and very excited to do this one. So I'm going to read from Kel's bio real quick to introduce them, and then we will get into the questions. So, Kel Coleman is a mom, editor, and Ignyte-nominated author. Their fiction has appeared or is forthcoming in FIYAH, Anathema, Spec from the Margins, Apparition Lit, The Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy 2022, and others. Though Kel is a Marylander at heart, they currently live in Pennsylvania with their husband, Tiny Human, and a stuffed dragon named Pen. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that introduction?
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
So, your website tagline is author, editor, possibly a dragon. And I was just curious, what are the tells that you're a dragon?
I think it's so funny. You're the first person who's ever at least noticed it or mentioned that to me. I just kind of put it on there as a joke, but I do also have tells. So let's see. I have a lot of collections. Like I have too many books and notebooks, of course, because I'm a writer, but I also collect rocks and board games. I have an old collection of keychains from my teenage years. I have too many magic cards that I don't even play with anymore. And of course, statues of other smaller dragons. And I'm a homebody. I love to be cozy and surrounded by my stuff. I have been known in certain contexts to roar. And I wish I could say I breathe fire, but I'm a little bit too laid back for that. So
nice. I mean, I guess this is the season to be cozy and at home.
yeah, I mean, every season is a season to be cozy and at home.
That's true. The summer is not much better with the heat.
No.
So like, do you have like a favorite rock? And this is kind of on the spot, but if you'd like to
have
show
a
us a favorite
rock.
rock, I'd like
I
to see
wish I had a rock nearby. I don't actually. My rock collection is getting ready to be tumbled at some point, so it's all like packed away with my rock
Okay,
tumbler.
got it.
But I do have some really cool rocks. I have this one rock that's like it's like about that small, and
Mhm.
it's perfectly black, but it has like a little orange circle around it, almost like an eclipse. And I'm obsessed with it. I look at it all the time.
That's cool. Where did you find it?
Probably on the beach. Probably that's usually where I find rocks, or I'll be walking in a forest and see a cool rock. Yeah.
Nice. Um,
Wait, do you have any rocks? Do you collect rocks?
I have like a random like box of just like assorted things I collect over the years. Like I have like a bunch of shells because
Nice.
yeah, I go to Jersey in the summer and like there's a bunch of shells on the beach, and I really like moon snail shells because like it's rare to find them like intact and stuff, and
Oh,
I just think
wow.
moon snails are cool. I do have some rocks, but
You're more a shell
when I was a
person.
lot younger, it's like a trek, and like I haven't looked at them in a bit. I feel like they're not as interesting as I remember them being when I first picked them up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just so fascinated by like the geological processes behind rocks that I'll stare at them way longer than probably most people do.
No, I get that. I don't remember much about rock history, but I was gonna be like, if Kel says like igneous or basalt, I think I know enough to remember
You
what those
can
mean.
nod your head and go, yeah, that.
Yeah, pyroclastic flow, man, all that good stuff. So what got you started writing?
I mean, I think like most people, I've been writing since I was a kid. But it was really in my teen years when I was like devouring speculative YA. Do you remember speculative YA in like the early 2000s when it was like Twilight and the Uglies trilogy
Yes.
and like all of these like really popular books came out, and I was just eating them up one after another, and I was like, wow. I think I'd love to be a novelist. Like that would be really cool if I can make other people feel the way that these books make me feel. That would be a really cool job to have. Fast forward to 2019, and I actually had the opportunity to put more time and energy into my writing. So I joined some writing groups, which really helps with that like creative isolation, and helped me stay motivated. And in one of the groups I had joined, we actually started doing writing prompts. And that's where I fell in love with short fiction. That's where I suddenly started writing short fiction. I was like, oh, I can actually finish a story instead of like writing 30,000 words of a novel that isn't going to go anywhere. I think I've gotten better as a writer now, and I think I am ready to write a novel. But when I first started, it was really cool to find out that you could write like 3,000 words and then you were finished.
Yeah, no, for real. Um, I guess, do you have like a favorite writing prompt that like comes to your head where it was like, this is the one?
Well, one of the first writing prompts we did was just a picture of like a skeleton, like a giant skeleton, like built into a mountain. And I ended up writing this short fiction story that never made it anywhere because it wasn't quite right, about a young boy traveling to like a giant skeleton community and like people who live inside of the skeleton. And I thought that one was kind of cool. But for the most part, I get prompts from I did Inktober once, but as a writer. So like I
Oh,
used the one word prompts to come up with story ideas. And I found that pretty helpful. Like one word prompts, I think, are pretty great because they give you a lot of creative freedom, and you can kind of take the story where you want. So
nice. No, the skeleton thing sounds really cool. I really like, I don't know if you've read Escaping Exodus by Nikki Drayden, but
yeah.
it's about like this giant um like alien in space. It's like the size of a planet, and
Hmm.
people can't live on Earth anymore, so they live as parasites on this giant
Hmm.
alien. And I don't know, I really am fascinated by like things that show people as being really little and like in this part of this like giant
Yeah.
ecosystem. So like them as like parasites, or not, not parasites, like carrion animals or something, like scavengers on the skeleton sounds really cool to me.
Yeah. I love that kind of like aesthetic where like the you can use the world building to really like drive home. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought, but that sounds like a really cool book. You should definitely send me a link for that.
I'll make a note before I forget because my memory is
Yeah.
not what it used to be.
Oh, same. Same as you saw me go, I had a thought and then it just flew away.
Yeah, it's happened to me more and more frequently. Um, so I mean, there's a bunch of congratulations in order because you're an Ignyte-nominated author. That's super exciting.
Thank you.
And you're also recently announced as the editor for Baffling Magazine. And I was curious, like, what drove you to apply for or accept the position? Like, how did you get into editing?
Yeah, so I took the position with Baffling because it's a really great magazine. It's a really good fit for me. I love flash fiction. I love queer stories. And Dave, the editor, my co-editor, I had the opportunity to work with through my story in Unfettered Hexes. And he's just an incredible human and like a fantastic editor. So there's going to be so much I get to learn. And this was also a chance for me to take the next step in my editing, from assistant editor to co-editing. I had the opportunity through Diabolical Plots, to guest edit an issue. And it was really hard to make final selections, but I really enjoyed that process. And so I'm going to get to do more of that at Baffling. I'm really excited.
Nice. So when you were at Diabolical Plots, it was just for the one issue. You weren't on.
Oh no, I'm an assistant. I'm still an assistant editor.
Okay.
I was an assistant editor, but I also did like I got to make the final selections instead of the EIC, so that was pretty cool.
What's an EIC?
Editor in chief. Yep.
Mm,
So David's the editor in chief over at Diabolical Plots, and he usually makes final selections. But there's been one issue this year that I got to pick the stories for. It was the food issue. It came out in May, and those stories are just incredible. And getting to like see the slush pile and getting it's like candy. You just get to like read all these amazing stories. We had so many good stories. I could have filled an anthology.
mhm.
With these stories. So I'm pretty excited to get to do this over at Baffling, where I get to go back into the slush pile and like pick my faves. And so yeah, it's
Yeah,
gonna be pretty
Baffling.
great.
All right, I'm gonna cut you off.
No, you're fine.
Baffling publishes some really exciting flash fiction.
Yes.
Like, I think some of my favorite fiction I've read in the past couple years has been from Baffling. Like, I really like Sunskins by Darcy Penfollowo. Duppy by Bendy Barrett's another one I feel like I'm always raving about.
Yeah.
Um,
Isn't that author coming out with a novella soon for Neon Hemlock? That's
yep.
really cool.
Empire of the Feast.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be like sensual, like dark fantasy from what I remember. I'm really
That is
excited
just
for that.
very much my thing. I can't wait to read it. Yeah. Another story I really love in Baffling was Bandit Reaper Yours by
Oh,
Jen
by Jen
Brown.
Brown.
I love Jen Brown.
Yeah, she's great. I had her on for an interview like way back when. I think she might have been
Nice.
the first short story author I interviewed, actually.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to share a table of contents for Anathema, I think. And she had this really great superhero story,
Oh, right,
that
right,
I
right.
loved.
That's yeah.
The Rise Blown Open.
Yeah, and yours was Cirque Mechanique, right?
Yeah.
Issue? Okay.
You have a
Um,
good memory.
this, yeah, I just spend way too much time online and looking at lists of things. So this is the only time I get to show off with that, I guess. Um, but yeah, for people who are like kind of skittish about like I guess issues of magazines or something, Baffling Year One Anthology is like a bind up. Like you can get like a little printed novella. If I'd been
Mhm.
thinking, I would have got it from my bookcase so I could show it to you, but it's available for print. So you can buy a physical
Yeah.
if you desire.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, those books were edited by I think Craig and Dave, and so my first one
Mhm.
will probably be out. I don't have the schedule in my head. Don't ask me to think about it. But my first window is in December, so
Okay, nice. And like, how did it feel to get the Ignite Award nomination? I'm just asking from one Ignite nominee to another.
I mean, I think you know how it felt. I was freaking out. I was like, how is this possible? This is one of the coolest awards in the industry, and for like people to see my work and to think it's good. I mean, that's incredible. What a good feeling. And yeah, I don't think I'm still over it. I have my Ignite award over here, and I just like I occasionally look at it when I'm working to be like, you can do this.
That's funny. I need to figure out where I'm gonna put mine because my room's like a
Yeah,
mess. Like right now, I think it's currently like on my bed. Like I need to film like a haul video at some point. So like my bed has like the posts, and I have like a stack of books that need to show up in the video, and
yeah.
I have like the Ignite award on top, so I can just like show it and brag about it a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
It
the
does have a
finalist
point.
medal. Sorry,
Huh?
I was just saying the finalist medal is just so gorgeous, and it's like it's got like a lot of weight to it. Like
It's hefty.
it's beautiful. The design on the back is amazing.
What was my next question? So talks a little bit about like your background as an editor and a writer. And I was wondering if we could talk a little bit more about, the writing itself. And specifically your two shorts, Delete Your First Memory for Free and A Study of Sage. I'll give like a brief synopsis for people who haven't read the stories, but Delete Your First Memory for Free is about a like young adult who is kind of out with a bunch of friends and they run into um this like one girl who they used to have a thing with and it didn't
Well,
go
who they want
well.
to have a thing with.
Oh, they want to have
Yeah, she's part of the friend group, so like they're like crushing.
a thing with? Okay. And they are kind of this like future setting and so there's like you got those like coupons for like Ubers or like new apps and stuff. They get this coupon like, oh hey, you want to delete a memory for free? The first first deletion's free. They're all kind of drunk. They're like, yeah, sure, why not? And it's about I guess the protagonist's decision, like what memory they're gonna delete, and also them trying to
Mhm.
figure out like, okay, like this girl, like what memory did she did she
Yeah. Yeah, it's a story about like anxiety and like so it's specifically social anxiety and like the way those memories kind of worm into your brain, like and you remember those embarrassing moments. And for a lot of people, it's like, oh God, that was so embarrassing, and they move on. But for someone like the main character, it's like they agonize about it forever and ever, and it becomes a much bigger thing than it really is. I don't know what that's like, of course, but no, it's for me, it's a very personal story. And yeah, and then in the study of Sage, I guess you're going to do the synopsis for that one because
I mean, you're probably gonna do it better. So if you want to do
so
the synopsis, you can.
yeah, so Study of Sage is about a woman trying to prepare and practice for a breakup in virtual reality because she wants to make sure she gets the wording right, and she has a pretty confrontational partner who like she wants to make sure that they don't steamroller, and that she gets a chance to say the things that she wants to say. So and you were kind of asking me about like I think I saw you post actually on Twitter
Yeah,
about
I'm
the
gonna post this
optimism
on
in
it.
the technology, and I think that's such an interesting point because it's not something I really think about that hard. But yeah, I like optimistic takes on technology. I feel like there's a lot of ones where the tech is bad because tech has a lot of evils built into it. But yeah,
Yeah, those were definitely the stories I'm used to. So I was like, what on earth is gonna happen with this shady little company? Why are they deleting memories for free?
it's so funny. Everyone's like, I kept waiting for it to take a dark turn, and I'm like, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but it didn't go horribly wrong. No, but I mean, I like honest endings, but I also like hopeful endings. So I try to like strike like a bittersweet note, and I don't think you can do that if someone deletes all their memories until they are a husk of themselves. So I think it's easy to be pessimistic, especially for me with my like experiences with tech in real life. But
Mhm.
I like to think of ways that they can help people. Like, I mean, if you take phones, for example, I can think of a lot of reasons why they're bad. But like my phone also lets me read audiobooks for free from the library and like stay connected to the people I care about and like find recipes and directions. So it's like not all bad. So with these stories, I'm like trying to use human drama basically instead of conflict with tech to drive the story.
And I think that's also something I noticed with the 2 stories, I guess how, like you said, warm and, like, human-centered they felt, even though, like, I feel like there's definitely, like, a trend of, like, text stories where it's, like, cold and distant and stuff, and I was
Mhm.
wondering, um, what what were you thinking or, like, I guess, what inspired you to, like, look at these ways that we can use tech to think through something very, like, human and personal, like, relationships?
I think that's just my approach to most storytelling. My approach to storytelling is always, I was talking to someone, I don't remember who, but I was talking about how like my stories are basically just two people having a conversation, and the speculative elements are important and are used to like highlight this conversation. But it's really, to me, if I can get two characters in a room having some kind of conflict slash like coming together, that's my favorite kind of story to tell. So I don't know. I think all of my stories are going to be pretty centered around the human drama, and then the speculative elements are there, but they're not ever where my focus is when I'm first
Mhm.
drafting a story. I usually have to go back and be like, okay, how does this actually tie in thematically?
So I guess if I'm understanding right, for you, the heart of the story is, like, the relationships.
Oh
I
yeah.
guess how do you, like, I guess, incorporate then the speculative elements? Like, I guess, what draws you to, like, fantasy and sci-fi as opposed to doing, like, contemporaries or
I think I'm more drawn to speculative fiction because that's what I read and love. It's kind of as simple as that. Like I just love speculative fiction. I do read general fiction too sometimes, but I really really like it when there's dragons and robots in my stories. Like I just want there to be something else going on besides the two people because I feel like if I were to write a story that was just two people dealing with their emotions, I would get very lost in like
Mm.
that journey, and the speculative element lets me bring in a little bit of the fun, a little bit of the excitement, I think. And I don't know, I just think it enables you to do way more layers
Mm.
than at least I can with general fiction. I know there are people out there doing amazing work, but yeah, I always want there to be some dragons and robots. That's all I ask.
That's very fair. I don't know, I think it's interesting how I think also, like, making stuff speculative can give you some distance, so you can, like, talk about things, like, more directly in an
Yes,
indirect way. It's, like,
yes.
really strange, but I've definitely had, like, sci-fi books I read where I was like, "If this was just, like, a, historical or something like that, I don't think I could do it," but, like, because of, like, the extra, like, "Oh, but there's mutants in the past," I'm like
Yeah.
can get
I
a
mean,
little
you get to do more metaphors. I mean, and I think that that's also really cool. I mean, I'm always thinking about The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. Have you had a chance to read that one?
yeah, I loved it.
I'm just obsessed with that book. And just the multiverse concept, the way that she uses it to tell these very human stories. I mean, where can you get that but speculative fiction? That's it's so interesting, the like philosophical almost debate that's happening in the book around like nature versus nurture, and like the multiverse concept allows you to drive that home perfectly. So I think that's kind of one of the biggest powers of speculative fiction is being able to yeah, like you said, take yourself a little bit away from it, give yourself a little distance so that you can think about it on a more like story scale. I'm running out of brain power on that one. I'm gonna take a sip of
Yeah,
water.
no, you're good. It's so funny that you mentioned that, because that one has tech in it too, and, like, I'm trying to think of, like, how do I feel like the tech brought them close? I mean, the tech did bring the people closer because they wouldn't have met. without the technology that they had.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit more pessimistic. I think that was a little bit more conventional in the in the so you got this powerful tech. Like, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think at some point I probably will also write like pessimistic fiction about technology, but I think it's a really good world building exercise to think about the ways technology can be used for good. Like, I don't think you're ever going to have a technology in a world that someone hasn't found a way to do something
Yeah.
wholesome with it. So I think it's always a good
Oh,
exercise.
LP's in the comments, and he said she just turned in the sequel, which is exciting news because I didn't know it was part of the
Oh, I
series.
didn't know it was going to be a new book. Okay, I'm very excited about that. Can I pre-order it now?
um, I also think I like the study of Sage because I guess this is kind of looping back to Space Between Worlds because I like stuff where it's kind of like, what if, like we have
Hmm.
this story, like I like behind the scenes content. I like thinking like, oh, like if this director made this decision or the actor had done this thing, like how could the final product have been different? And I like
Yeah.
the iterations and like the space between worlds. Okay, this is how we got all these different versions of these people. Also, a
Hmm.
study of Sage, like this is all the different things that could have happened in this
The ways that this
interaction. Yeah,
conversation could go horribly wrong or really
yeah.
well.
I mean, yeah, most of them went very, very wrong.
Yeah.
um. I guess, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, do you, I don't know, also like doing like multiverse stuff as well, or is it kind of like once you're doing
I mean,
multiverse?
I haven't touched the multiverse yet. I probably will. I've had an idea in my brain for years and years, but I'm not actually ready to write it. I don't think I'm a good enough writer to tell the story that I want to tell with it.
Mm,
So it's one of those things where you have the idea, you have it written down, you'll come back to it later.
mm. Like out of curiosity, what do you mean when you say like I'm not a good enough writer to touch that yet? Because I feel like that's something I hear from artists, like about like, oh, like this is like where my skill set is, and here's like what I want to execute, and there's like this like practicing I have to do before I get there, and
Yeah.
I I feel like I've asked this question to someone before, but I'm sure everyone will have a different answer to it. But like I kind of get it when people are like, actually, yeah, no, what does that mean for you?
For me, it means that my process is not in a place where I can write such a complicated story.
Mm,
Like this specific story has multiple POVs. It's set in an alternate Earth. It's got a lot of world building that needs to be done. I wrote maps for it. Like a
oh,
total nerd, I made a map on like Paint 3D. Like, so I've done a lot of work on it, but I don't have the outlining process finessed enough to do something that complicated. I don't
mm,
have my long fiction process figured out, and so my plan is to start with some novella. Start with a novella for long fiction because I feel like that's a length that I can work up to versus like I feel like this alternate universe story is like a trilogy or something, and I
oh
I
wow,
do not have. I am not there yet.
got it. Yeah, no, that's a pretty big leap.
Yeah,
Versus
from
trilogies,
short stories
novel
to a
trilogy.
trilogy.
Um, Another story that I was gonna ask you about was I Wear Spiders in Remembrance of Myself. That one was about a um I'll give the synopsis this time since you did the last one and you can just tell me if I'm doing it wrong. Of a black woman who realizes at a very young age that when people say kind of like hurtful things to her or like judgy things about her, like spiders come out of their mouth, and like she can see it, and like her mom notices her reacting to it, so her mom like knows about it, but it's like not
Yeah.
something that everyone knows about. Um,
It's a little it's fabulism, I think. Fabulism. I never quite know how to pronounce that. But so like the spiders are just like a natural occurrence in this world and like some people can see them and some people can't. And it has a lot to do with marginalization and your experience with the world. And the spiders come out whenever someone externally is like causing you trauma. You know what
mhm,
I mean?
mhm.
So that's
And basically the spiders like follow the person that they're like that they're directed at. So like
Yeah.
over the years, you can like have a big old box of spiders from
Yeah.
like all the things that
You
people have
collect
said.
them.
Yeah. And it's about her like just getting used to the fact that she can see all these spiders, and also her meeting people who like change her perspective on how she deals with the spiders
Hmm. Yeah.
that pop up.
I think that's a good synopsis.
Oh, cool. Um, I was curious why you picked spiders, all animals.
Why did I pick spiders? The short answer is they're really creepy to me, and I couldn't resist like this imagery of spiders coming out of people's mouths, because as a writer, that's gold. But the long answer is, and it's a very silly answer, so bear with me. I had this really weird camp song stuck in my head, about a boy sipping spiders through a straw, and my spouse was like, that's a really weird song. I don't think that like, and I was like, no, I'll show you. I'll look it up. I'll look it up on the internet. It turns out it was about sipping cider. So like
Uh,
I'm the weirdo. But I kind of had this image of a child plagued by spiders for like no reason stuck in my head then, and the metaphor of spiders as trauma developed naturally from there. Um, I also think I picked spiders because they elicit different responses in people, kind of like trauma does. Some people are okay with spiders in their house as long as they never see them. Some people keep them as pets. Some people kill them on sight. And people have different understandings of responses to and relationships with their trauma. So, like, spiders worked, I think, is a really good way to illustrate that.
I don't remember what picture book it was, but I just remember it. I feel like there was something where it was like someone would like spit out like it was probably a fairy tale where like the person who was like always saying mean stuff, they like what was it? There's probably like the good sister who like went and like got some favor from somebody, and the mean sister's like, I'm gonna do the exact same thing, but like she's mean, so you know she doesn't get the same result. And so every time she speaks, she's spitting out spiders and lizards and snakes and stuff.
What?
I
What?
can't
No.
remember what it was called. I'm pretty sure it was a fairy tale.
Well, that sounds like a really weird book, but also kind of awesome. So I hope you remember what it is and also tell me because I'm always looking for more books to read.
Yeah, I'm probably not gonna remember it. Like it's so fuzzy in my head. Um, but I was wondering also, like the protagonist relationship with the spiders kind of like changes over the years. Like not all the spiders behave the same. Like for a while they just
Mhm.
kind of show up, and there's one that like actually like bites her and she gets like a big old
Mhm.
welt. Um, and I was wondering, yeah, just like why could walk me through.
What? Sorry. What was the question?
Um, like at what point were you kind of like it's not enough for like the spiders to just was it always kind of an end game that like these spiders were going to do different things, or was there kind of a point where it's like it's not enough for the spiders to just be here, like there has to be something else that's going on with them.
I can't remember the development of that idea, but I don't think it would have worked as well if the spiders didn't progress and change because I mean, you it's in this. I mean, because like a lot of it is like okay, a microaggression occurs, and then you have a small spider, and then
Mm,
like sexual assault occurs, and then you have a biting, spider that like is a little, but like I don't think it would have worked if they all behaved the same way. So like I think it was important that to add for that layer of trauma to like have it change throughout her life and her relationship with it changes as well. I think the trauma we carry with us changes over the years and like the way that we view it changes over the years. And also memories
mm.
luckily sometimes just dump that stuff and you don't have to think about it as much anymore. And that's why there were spiders that were almost invisible, so that's yeah. Does that answer your question?
Mhm.
Okay.
Um, unfortunately, I don't know if I can ask like very like pointed questions about this story, but for me, the emotional arc was like very fulfilling. Like I
Mm.
really liked at one. There's like one like big moment where there are two people that the protagonist is dating, and they want to do like a photo shoot of people
Mhm.
like with their spiders on them, and like how they envision themselves, and like each of the people kind of has like a different relationship with their spiders, and it forces the protagonist to like maybe not forces, but like it encourages them to like rethink how they feel about their spiders because they've
Yeah.
been kind of like hiding them away, and then like she has a girlfriend who's like very much like no, they're just like here, they're just out and about.
Yeah.
And I really liked that final scene where it was kind of like just the emotional arc of the story was like very satisfying and like it
Yeah.
stuck with me.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people with trauma. You know, I don't know anybody who doesn't have at least a little. And everyone talks about it differently. So it's it's always been a challenge to me in my personal life to like be confronted with other people's trauma or my own trauma and like trying to decide how I'm going to respond to it or trying to decide how I like internally want to respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of a little bit the journey I was trying to capture. I also had like a lot of beta readers who were like, well, that's not how I would have dealt with that. And that's not how I see spiders for myself personally. And so like I got to like hear all these perspectives on like, that's not how those spiders feel to me. Like that's not how my trauma is for me. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's an interesting way to look at it. Can I steal that? You know, can I put this, can I add that? And I mean, there was a little bit of help there that
Mm-hmm.
I think having beta readers is super helpful because they always have ideas that you couldn't possibly have come up with on your own. So that's always really nice. And
I
it lets
think
you broaden the story. No, go ahead.
I was like, I think also something that like made it so interesting was that I was like, it's a photo thing. I was wondering why you chose like photo portraits. And like, you know, other people, even though like the person who's like posing for the portrait knows where those spiders are, like it doesn't show up in the photo. You kind of have to like go back and draw them in. And I
Yeah.
was curious why you chose like photography as the medium, because you know, it could have been clay, could have been all these other things,
Yeah.
you know.
You know, I don't know why I chose photography. I think it was just the right choice for the story. It's a theme I'm noticing in my stories. So I tend to have like stories where there's some kind of like secondary creative thing that is not writing. I think because I'm like, I don't want to be the writer that writes about writing. um, so there's always like, there's art, but it's not writing. I swear.
Yeah.
It's music or it's photography or it's, you know, in a study of Sage, it's an artist who does some vague art that I was like, I'm not going to go into what she does, but she's an artist. And I don't know. I don't know why I work on it. That's now I have to think about that. I don't know why I put like secondary art so much in my stories, but I thought photography worked really well because I wanted it to be like I wanted it to be like photorealistic. So like
Mhm.
I wanted you to actually see the people who are experiencing these things. And I like the idea of the photography, I guess, because there's nothing you can hide there. You're not I mean you can edit photos, but like the whole point of like drawing in the spiders on the photos is like the world sees something different than what the person who is affected sees, like when they look at
Mm.
themselves. Like when you look at your trauma, it's a very different experience than when other people like learn about things that you've been through, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I thought the photography helped do that, I guess. I don't know. You're asking me a lot of questions about these things. Like I am like this brilliant writer who's like thinking thematically, what is this photography going to do for the story? And I'm like, wow, wouldn't a photo shoot be cool? Like, I think that would make sense. And
I mean,
sometimes
I
that's
feel
as
like
deep as it is.
that's how a lot of writers talk about this stuff. They're like, I just did it because, and I'm like, I don't know. I also like fishing for stories. Like if there was like a fun story behind, like, oh, you know, I did like a photography class, or, like I was a
Oh
photography
yeah,
class,
no,
I'd be like, oh, I'm down to hear it.
I think I'm envious of all other kinds of art. I'm like, wow, how do you do that? You're so good at it. Like amazing. So I'm always just putting other artists in my stories because I adore them.
Yeah. It's always, I mean, I feel like there is the added layer of like reader scrutiny where like, oh, a writer writing about a writer.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I always kind of go, like write what you know, but
Yeah.
but no, I also will admit I sometimes enjoy reading stories about writers because I'm like relatable. I've been
Yeah.
through this.
Yeah, I remember there's a short story by N.K. Jemisin. I forget what it's called, but it was about the writer who like won a bunch of awards and how the awards weren't a great thing. I don't remember where in the trajectory of her career she wrote that story, but it's
Okay.
called, hmm.
Is that in her collection or
Yeah, it wasn't How Long Till Black Future Month.
okay? I'll have to dig through that then because I haven't read the whole thing front to cover yet. But
Yeah. I feel like another one I liked about artists was The Spectral Hue by Craig Lansky. No one's asking for recommendations. I'm just gonna spout them off.
I mean, you're a reviewer. Of course, you've got recommendations. That's your whole job.
But been beating the drum for Spectral Hue by Craig Lansky lately. It's like this ghost who possesses like these African American folk artists in
Mhm.
a fictional town in Maryland, actually. And she makes them like make art with like the same colors, like same shade of purple, different things from the Martian stuff. And it was like very interesting
Hmm.
conversation around like art and why do artists create. And yeah, I enjoyed it.
Okay.
That's another one
Yeah.
of those things where I was like, interesting. This is an interesting take on art from an artist.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, I can't get enough of those. The Colors of the Immortal Palette by
I haven't heard of that
Carolyn
one.
Yoakum. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And I'm a sucker for vampire stories. So like I'm immediately like, yes, what is the story about vampires? I'm in, but it's so beautiful. Definitely worth a read.
Oh, okay. So this is a short in a Uncanny Magazine.
Yes, I think it's a novelette, I want to say.
Okay.
I want to say it's been nominated for a number of awards. It's beautiful.
Okay. Add that to the list. I guess, do you have like a favorite story about art? Like if it's a sci-fi or fantasy?
Do I have a favorite? I have actually a book that I love from my uh, young adult years called Poison by Chris Wooding. Um, and it is one of the weirdest stories I've ever read where it's just basically a story about stories. Like the
Mm,
whole story is about how we tell stories. And
mm,
it is, I can't describe it without giving it away, but it's like a lot of fairy tale retellings and like old myths used. And everything about it is just like, as a writer, you're like, wow, that's like, you're really dropping some metaphors here. And like also just literally having characters who are like, yeah, we're in a story. Don't you know? You're supposed to play your role. You better play your role or the
mm.
storyteller will get upset. And it's like, what? It's a really good I think it's YA. It's just it's awesome and it takes place in a marsh, at least in the beginning. So
Yeah, I was just looking at the cover because, like, I don't think I ever read it, but I feel like I temporarily worked at a library like part time as a high schooler, and I feel like I shelved it or at least walked by it a bunch of times.
yeah, I'm like staring right at
It
it.
sounds
It's like it's
familiar.
got like shiny purple eyes that like follow you across the room.
Oh no, mirages. Um, so like another one of your stories, I was gonna ask you about was Early Evening Soul,
Hmm.
which was there's a person who's recently died. There's a guy who's recently died,
Hmm.
and there's a spirit who's supposed to be like shepherding him onto the afterlife, but
Hmm.
the guy doesn't really want to go. And it's about the interactions that the two have and like the decisions that the both of them eventually make. I feel like this one I have to be very, very vague because it's like
Yeah, you can't give away the whole thing. There's a lot going on in that story.
um I was wondering, I guess, what inspires you to write about like the afterlife and like
I
this
mean,
take on it.
well, I write a lot about death because I'm scared of it. And one way I deal with my fear of death is to write stories about people living beyond death. I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of death being the ending. I'm always like, maybe there's something after. So I tend to want to write stories about that. But for this one specifically, I've had this image of like a modern Reaper against like a city backdrop in my head for a while now. And all I knew was he was conflicted about his job. And that was all I had. And I just kind of put the idea aside and was like, I'll come up with this later. And then LP Kindred put out a call for the issue. He was guest editing for Speculative City. And this is a magazine centered around cities. And I started imagining this sort of slice of life workday from the perspective of the Reaper. And my initial vision sort of changed along the way as I realized like I wasn't telling just a story about someone who hated their job, but like their life. They were like, I don't want what I have. And they're having like he's having nascent yearnings for change. And I also love subplots where people kiss. So he's also having like complicated feelings about this soul he's supposed to be helping. If I have realized I will put a subplot that involves people eventually kissing in a story as often as I can. Like I'm currently writing a horror story that is somehow becoming a romance, and I don't know if that's right, but
I mean, I feel like they exist. I feel
they
like
do.
heard of them. I don't read too much romance, so I can't tell you much more than that, but
Yeah.
they're not the
It was
first, it won't be the last.
no, definitely not. I've read a few horror romances I enjoyed, though I'm failing to think of any off the top of my head right this moment. But I don't know. I always love people connecting, even in the midst of the worst of it. So yeah, it was just kind of a more of a vibe that I had with this story, and then I kind of built it out into an actual tale. So.
Mhm. Um, are you like a character-driven writer? Like, do the characters come pretty easy for you, or is it kind of like, is there something else that when you start a story, you're like, this is how I like dive into writing it?
All of my stories start as like very vague premises.
Mhm.
Like modern Reaper against a city backdrop is not the characters are not there. It's just an idea that I have that I think sounds cool. And
Mhm.
that's how a lot of my stories start. It's just like an idea, but pretty quickly I find my way to some character story. Characters are definitely my focus. I used to be really big into world building, and I used to make these huge like world building diaries and like really make sure I knew everything about it. But I was realizing that the characters tell the story of the world so much better than I can usually, and I just really enjoy having them talking to each other and emoting, and it's all just very like angsty. My stories are pretty angsty, and I think that you can't do that without character.
Yeah.
So that's always my focus.
So I was
But
wondering, sorry, I didn't want to
no,
cut
no, you go ahead.
no, I didn't mean to cut you off.
And now I don't remember what I was going to say, so now you have to ask
Oh,
your
sorry, you really
question.
sad to just step up. Okay. So, I was wondering, I guess, how, I guess, crafting the main character for this story went, because he's like, hmm. I mean, I don't think the characters in any of your stories really feel the same, but to me, he like kind of stood out as being like more snarky, more jaded,
Mm.
than some of the other ones that I had read by you. And I was wondering, I guess just like how that character came about. Was it like kind of like, yeah, just how did it come about?
That's so interesting. Yeah, I do think my characters tend to be a little bit more soft-spoken, a little bit. I think if there's a character in that story that's more like my typical character, it's Dominic,
Yeah,
the soul.
it's always
Monroe is very much a new voice for me to try out. I tend to I tend to just want to try new stuff, and so I'll usually read something that has a voice that I'm like, "Ooh, that's compelling," and I'll give it a go. I think for this one, I think the snarkiness made sense to me, like as a character who's kind of angsty and going through some stuff, and it's just like, I just want to like do my life, leave me alone, everybody, like I think being kind of snarky and sarcastic worked for him,
mhm,
and added a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not excitement, but like verve, I don't know, color to the character interactions, because the soul is so like Dominic's very like laid back and reserved. So I don't think someone who's also laid back and reserved would have played as well off of that character.
mhm,
So yeah. And with characters, I usually I have this trick that I use where I think of someone I kind of know in real life, and try to think of how they talk and the way that they hold their body, and like I'm not putting them into the story because I'm not using anything about them
mhm,
personally, but it's just like their whole vibe will somehow get in my brain. Or I'll cheat and just use like a TV trope character that
yeah.
like you can eventually flesh out into like something that feels more real. I think tropes get a bad rap, but they really help you like shortcut the like brainstorming process so that you can tell the story that you want to tell.
Has anyone that you've like loosely based a character off of been like, wait a second, that's me?
You know, not yet. I hope they don't notice because my goal is to like obfuscate it enough that they're like, that person seems cool. And I'm like, yeah, they are cool, aren't they?
um, there's a comment from LP a little bit ago. Love early evening soul. Co-edited, so I'm biased.
Yeah, but he did a great job co-editing it. Gave me a lot of ideas for uh, beefing up the character arc and making the story a little bit punchier. So it was super helpful. So thanks, LP.
I was wondering, I guess, what's your creative process like? Like, if you're sitting down, you're going to brainstorm. Are there like tips and tricks you would share with other writers, or something that like
Um,
works for you?
yeah, so my brainstorming process is kind of chaotic. I actually happen to have illustration of it here, I think, where I just like I use
Oh,
gel pens,
it's a black
and I
paper
don't
with
want
a
to
gel pen?
give give away my secrets, but yeah, I use gel pens on black paper when I first start brainstorming, because I feel like it takes me outside of my own head. Like it takes me back to my teen years when I wrote really bad vampire stories about like an 18-year-old vampire who has to run her vampire hunting clan, and like, oh, it's so hard for her, and like that kind of like, you just don't care. Like you're just like, I'm having fun and that's all that matters. That's what I'm trying to capture when I'm writing on black paper. Are you laughing at my little teenage idea? Because I feel like we all have those like teenage
Yeah,
reiterations of
no,
stories that we
awkward
love.
flashbacks.
I still have some of those, and I still go back and read them and go, wow, you were really describing a lot of clothing in these opening sequences, as she stares in the mirror and goes, I have on a red shirt today and glittery lip gloss. I sure hope this boy that I like likes me back. And I'm like, this is so hard to read. But anyway, so yeah, I tend to work on the black paper when I'm first brainstorming, because it's just fun. It feels
Mhm.
fun, but it's also good because I can use the different colors to make ideas pop. I'll sometimes like
Mm.
circle something in pink but write it in white, and like something about that helps the notes not get as lost as they usually do. Usually I fill notebooks and then like they go missing for 3 years, but the black notebook idea has been helping. And then I usually move on to, I have a very chaotic process. I'm sorry. So then I go on to like a notepad and I just like kind of write out the general synopsis. And then I finally move into like a proper word processor to start writing it out. But I end up rewriting most of my short stories. They rarely are the first draft that I started
Mm.
with, just like kind of finessed. Very few stories just roll off the top of my head. I think one of the few ones that did that was Delete Your First Memory for Free. That one was almost stream of consciousness. I wrote that one in one day. But the rest of them take a lot of finessing and a lot of thinking about like, what am I trying to say here? I found trying to think about what am I trying to say here before I dive into the story actually
Mm.
really messes up my process, because then I'm like trying to like force everything into the box of what I'm trying to say, rather than just kind of naturally letting events unfold and letting characters be themselves. So I find that the first draft, even though it's frustrating having to rewrite an entire 5,000 words, that like it helps me get to know them
Mm.
and the world and the plot, so that when I dive in to do it again, I'm I'm in much better footing. You know what I mean? So that's my process. It's a mess. I don't know if I recommend it. I think people should probably do whatever works for them. My process only kind of works for me. So
Um, so I guess what are like new things you want to try in your writing? Like I know you mentioned that you are trying to do a novella, but is there anything else you're like looking forward to challenge yourself with, or just you want to incorporate more of?
yeah, definitely want to get longer fiction going. I want to try some epistolary stuff. I have a lot of love for unusual structures and unusual formats. That's something I'd like to try.
Quick aside, epistolary is the letter format, right?
Yeah, letter format. Though I think I've seen some people say it also is like notes. It could be a grocery list.
Hmm.
I think it's, but I don't know for sure if that counts as epistolary, so don't quote me on it. But yeah, I like unusual structures and unusual formats, but I haven't actually tried any myself. I think I'm too scared, but we'll give it a go eventually. That's something I'm excited about. And right now I'm trying my hand at horror. That's
Mm.
just a new genre for me. I've been reading a lot of it, though not. I haven't read a lot of long fiction. I've read a lot of short story horror. And I'm finding that's challenging because you're digging into like what makes you uncomfortable, like a lot, and you do that with any story because you got to
Mm.
create conflict. But like something about horror specifically is like very personal.
Mm.
Yeah,
Did you
so
like watch or read a lot of horror growing up, or is this kind of like a new horizon for you?
I'm a coward. I was scared of Scary Movie 3. That scene where
Is that the
she comes out
parody
to,
series?
yeah, it's the parody.
Okay.
And I walked away from that haunted. Okay, so I don't watch horror movies
Okay.
because they stuck in my head too much. They get stuck in my head way too much. I've seen Get Out, I've seen Midsummer, and I think that's as horror-ish as I get, which I mean, those are pretty scary, but something about those compositions. I don't like jump scares, I think it's what it is.
Okay.
And I don't like really like creepy stuff. Like if it's really creepy, I can't do it. I'll just be waiting for it to crawl up from under my bed. I can't.
Yeah, I don't have room to talk about stuff like that because I went to see one of the Final Destination movies, and after like the first 10 minutes, I was like, I'm just gonna put this sweatshirt over my head. I'm gonna take a nap, and I will talk to you all when this movie is finished.
Are you one of those people that you see those logging trucks and you're like, oh no?
Yeah, I definitely see stuff with the trucks on the back, the trucks with like the freight or whatever on the back, like logs or like ladders, and I'm like, that rope is gonna snap, and I'm going to switch lanes because I will not be behind this truck when that happens.
Do you consume a lot of like horror media?
No, I'm a weenie.
Yeah, that's fair.
My little sister's a little bit more like, I was scared of Coraline. Like, I did not turn my lights off after I watched Coraline.
To be fair, Coraline is really creepy. Like,
I was a little old to be doing that though. I was like a teenager at that time, and my little sister loved it, which made it even funnier. It's kind of more
no,
than mine.
you will get no judgment from me on what I was scared of Scary Movie 3, as I have said. Like, that's not okay. I shouldn't be that scared of something that is a parody of a horror movie, but it is what it is.
So, do you celebrate Halloween?
I do. I don't think I've gotten a costume in a really long time though.
Mm.
Gonna try this year.
Do you have a costume idea you're trying to pull off, or decorations you're really excited to put up, or not really?
This might be too on brand, but just vampire. I just want to be a vague vampire. But I'm gonna try to find like I found like this old like Victorian coat that it's like I'm gonna try out with like a vest. I don't know what it's gonna look like, and then I got those like I'm gonna try to get those little caps that you can put on your teeth. And that will probably be as much effort as I put into my costume because I've also got to like buy candy for kids in the neighborhood and like all that stuff. So, what about you? Are you dressing up?
An attempt will be made. So I don't know if people probably haven't read the comic because it's relatively recent. I don't think it got a huge following, but The Wilds by Vita Ayala with art by Emily Pearson. It's like it was a 5-issue comic series, and it was like the comic book that got me into actually like getting comics like in the store like as it come out. It's like a dystopian future about basically a zombie apocalypse, but you can tell who's a zombie because they have like plants and mushrooms and stuff like growing on their bodies. And I really love the artwork in that series. And so I am going to attempt special effects makeup for the first time in ever. And I don't even really do regular makeup like that. So
what do you mean by special effects? Are you gonna try to put like mushrooms on and stuff like that?
Yeah, like so I got some scar wax so I can try and like do like the roots, like a raised effect. And then I got some like spirit gum, which is supposed to like be like okay for like sticking stuff to your skin, and I got some like little fake daisies. I'm gonna try and do something on like my face or my arm or something. And we'll see how that goes. I'm not gonna trial it because I'm tired, but like it's probably gonna be like the day of Halloween. I'll give it a whirl, and what happens. I'll take a picture for Twitter.
I mean, that sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing the pictures because I mean, that sounds like a lot of work and effort, but like I think it's gonna pay off. Like,
hopefully. I mean, I feel like worst case scenario it'll just be fun because I've never done it before.
Yeah.
Speaking of Halloween, what's the worst piece of Halloween candy you ever got? I just saw someone tweet about it, and I was just like, taking down memory lane.
I cannot remember bad Halloween candy, but I did have this neighbor who, she was like this adorable old lady, and she would give out bags of dimes, like little sandwich bags full of dimes. And there were only like 3 kids in the neighborhood, so it was just like me and like my cousin and like one other kid, but she had these bags of dimes that she would hand out instead of candy, which I guess was fine because it was money, but like it was
back in the day where you could like actually get stuff with the dime, like go to like the little bubble and actually get candy.
Yeah.
It's not too bad.
I went to a store one time with my mom in like a convenience store, and she's like, you can't buy anything with a nickel. And I'm like, I will find something for a nickel in the store. And I found like a little crappy piece of gum, and I was like, see?
There. Yeah. The only thing I've seen for a dime recently is like one of those like corner stores where it's just like everything there, and they had like the single pack, like literally like a single Swedish fish, like in a little thing, and that was a dime. But other than that,
I'm having trouble understanding the like finances on it. Is it worth it to package a single Swedish fish?
I don't know. Like I might have been slightly larger than a regular Swedish fish, but like it still wasn't a big package. Like it was like yay large.
That is so bizarre.
Yeah, I don't understand it. I think the worst thing I got, I know for sure the worst thing I got was a single like pre-wrapped prune. I was like, you could just turned your lights off and told me to go home.
Why do you need to attack people like that? You don't need to, just don't give out anything. Why would you do that?
I don't even remember like where I was or like the person who gave it to me. I just remember like I'll just randomly like be looking through old photos in my camera roll and I'll be like, why is there this at one Halloween?
That's a crime.
It was a travesty. She was lucky that there's like not people who teepee houses in our neighborhood because I feel like that would have got it done.
Yeah. Okay, but what's your favorite Halloween candy though?
I really like Baby Ruth's or 100 grams, and like I feel like that's a candy that a lot of people don't like. So I always like get like people like just give me like the bags of theirs.
Do the
like,
trades.
Yeah.
Nice.
So wait, what's your favorite Halloween candy?
I like mini Butterfingers because I usually won't eat Butterfingers, but if they're small, I'm like, okay, I can manage this much Butterfinger. So those are pretty good.
I get that. I swear that the mini M&Ms taste better than regular M&Ms. I can't explain it. It's just something about like the crunch to chocolate ratio that I like better about the minis.
Interesting. I think for me, this is gonna sound dorky, but like it's like how little M&Ms there are. Like I feel like after a while, M&Ms just kind of become this like same-ish flavor in your mouth, and like there's no complexity. So like a small bag of M&Ms is like pleasant, but like a big bag of M&Ms, I'm like, I have to eat this whole thing. I will do it, but like, will I enjoy it? You know?
Yeah. It's like drink some water, like cleanse your palate.
Like eat some ginger.
Yeah. So we're kind of towards the end of the interview. Do you have any upcoming projects that we should keep an eye out for?
I have my first submission window as co-editor with Baffling Magazine in December. I would love to see tons of submissions for that. We have a special theme of performance we're doing general submissions, but also a performance theme submission. And I'm really, really excited about that because I'm a theater kid. And my most recent story, Early Evening Soul, is free to read at speculativecity.com. And my story, Delete Your First Memory for Free, is in the Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy. I got my author's copy and I freaked out. It's edited by Rebecca Roanhorse, along with, and it has like some other incredible, incredible stories. There's so much good fiction in here, definitely worth picking up. And that's out on November 1st, and you can still pre-order it. So that's what
okay. So I know I said that was like we're closing up, but you said you're a theater kid, so now I have to ask, what's your favorite play?
Oh gosh, what's my favorite? I was a Rent kid. I grew up on Rent. That's why I know every single line of that original Broadway production. And I was in like this Black theater company when I was young. And so they would always make everything Blacker if they could. So like we did Annie, but it was Little Orphan Annie. And instead of Miss Hannigan, it was Miss Washington because reasons I don't know, but I loved it. It was great.
Awesome. Well, those are all my questions for today. Thank you so much to the audience for coming out. Thank you so much, Kel, for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I guess any final things? I feel like we're all good.
No, this is great.
All right, awesome. Well, goodbye, everyone. Have a good rest of your day and take care. Bye.